Hi Chris, sorry, I just realized I have to back up to be completely in the shot. And you can almost see my really cool skunk shirt. It's actually a kid's shirt, but if I get an extra large, I can fit into them. Yeah, so I read the first 3 pages of your graveyard story. I want to know what happens next. And I want to know a lot. So basically you left me with a lot of questions, and I know that was one of your hopes, that one of your goals that you were trying to achieve. And you've definitely achieved it. I wouldn't necessarily say that the ending was a true cliffhanger, but since it did leave me with so many questions and wanting to know more, you'll have to kind of take that into consideration of what are you wanting by cliffhanger. I'll get to that when I get to the end though, but I thought I would just go through and, like I usually do, and just let you know what my thoughts were along the way. I didn't do any editing for the grammar or anything like that because you didn't ask me to, but I still made note of a few things that I thought I would let you know about. So, to begin with, I found your versatility between the Warlock story and this story to be really impressive. They both are in a similar kind of horror, dark fantasy vein, but the style is just so different, and that was really delightful for me to see a little bit of your range. And yet still, they still had kind of a gothic, slow building of suspense feel. You're pretty masterful at that. Your style, I'm calling it your style now that I've read, two distinctly separate pieces from you. And I know you haven't read Dracula, but again, it reminds me of Dracula, just that slow building of suspense. And there's kind of this otherworldly, old worldliness to your storytelling that you don't always find. Bram Stoker wrote, I don't remember the name. You might want to read it sometime. He wrote a short story. It's not as short as this. It's longer. I think... Okay, I don't want to spoil it for you anyway. But if you look up Bram Stoker's short story and you're curious, give it a read. Just because I think that once you start publishing this, other people are probably going to draw some comparisons between your work and Stoker's work. And so it's just always, interesting to be aware. And plus, since you have a similar style, you might find it amusing. If I can find the short story, I'll include it in my email to this. It's really good. And again, yeah, it reminds me of your stuff, which is good to be compared to one of the classics. Of course, there's a little bit of Edgar Allan Poe in there, especially in the short story medium. Poe believed that if a story can't be read in one sitting, it shouldn't be read at all. So, excuse me, my allergies are still annoying me. To begin with, this first journal entry, August 27th, I really liked how it oriented me in terms of the setting, the place, what's going on, who am I following, who am I with. However, I have a lot more questions about this narrator. I want to know, because that last line really gave this person a personality. I finally have a place to stay where I won't have some man-hating landlady complaining about my girly magazine collection. So, oddly enough, before that line, I kind of had the vibe that we were in some other era, kind of back in the day. I don't know if you intended that or not, but it felt kind of old-fashioned for some reason. And then I had the line about the girly magazines. Well, I'm sure those have existed for a long time. But then that kind of made me be like, okay, this is at least, after 1900. This isn't, and maybe it is because your writing does have that, like I said, old world charm. It makes me think of the classics that I think, oh, maybe it's set in the 1800s. And when you get feedback like that, like what I just gave you, if it rings true to you, then and you don't want it to read that way, then you could make some changes. However, I've had plenty of situations where, okay, like one of my short stories, which you've read, The Walkers in Darkness, when I had my fiction class read that, like half the class was confused because for the first few paragraphs they thought it was a Western. And I was like, well, why'd they get that idea? And they said, oh, it's because of the word cabin. So all it took was that word cabin and people walking around, no references to modern technology, for them to kind of start painting that picture. And then when they met the character Gregors, they're like, what kind of name is that? Okay, this probably isn't a Western then. And had to reorient themselves. So I never knew what to do with that. I didn't know if, I'm like, well, that was your fault for jumping to that conclusion, or if maybe I should give more hints early on, because you don't want the reader to feel like they just kind of got comfortable and then the rug was pulled out from under them, which I think people kind of felt like when they read that story. I don't feel like that here, but I am left with the same question of what era are we in. So I think this story could probably, from what I've read, be told in many different eras, but if you had one in mind, try to give us a few hints. I also was very curious, why is he taking this job? Answering that question would be an opportunity to let us know more about this character. Because we don't even know this person's name. I'm pretty sure it's a male, because they have girly magazines, but I suppose it could be a lesbian. I'm assuming it's male, though. And so I would see, this is where it's weird, because if you're writing a journal, you're not going to be writing your name. So you might have to get creative to put that in there. Maybe in the dialogue of like when Hal's talking to him, maybe he comes up with some cute nickname for them and be like, well, I don't know why he's calling me Danny out of Dan, or I don't know. Something like that to weave the name in. You will have to get creative given that it's journal entries. But the other question I had was, why does he keep a journal? And so answering that question, answering why he keeps a journal and why he's taking this job, can give us a lot more information about this character. He's happy that he has this place to stay, but he seems a little like that's not a big deal to him. At the end he's like, oh, it's, well, whatever, I'm not going to be bothered. But I'm thinking as a modern American, and especially as a Californian, I'm like, there's a housing shortage everywhere, and housing prices, at least in so much of our country, are so high that if you get a job and it's like, yeah, it comes with a place to stay, you'd be like, yeah, this is awesome. So I found that not discrepancy, but I found that interesting about this person, that they're just like, well, it's nice to have a place without a man-hating old lady. But also, then I'm like, where did they come from? What is their background? And yeah, who takes a job at a graveyard? What kind of person? An immediate thing, and again, I don't know if this is something you intended. This could just be me projecting, so again, take it or leave it. In this first paragraph, sorry, I'll move on in a minute. But I thought, what if this guy is keeping a journal because a therapist or someone like that advised him to? And he's like, well, you could weave in something like, I've gotten pretty used to making these entries by now, or you could go a different route and be like, it's kind of lonely out here, but I feel like I'm talking to someone. It's nice to, at the end of the day, to be able to say, record what I did as if I'm talking to a friend or whatever. But just give us a little bit more, because the more we know about him as a person and the more we feel like he's a vulnerable person, just like all of us, the more we're going to connect to him and care about what happens to him later, which is really important. In that first paragraph, this is a silly grammar thing, but it stood out to me. Hal Johnson, the senior watchman, took me around and showed me where the embalming house and the storage shed and the water pump was, but I believe that should be were. And then my little pet peeve thing of repeating words, which I'm totally guilty of, so I try to point it out when I see it. This seems believable, but there seems to be something off about this. Just the two seems together in one sentence, you might want to consider switching one out. Okay, the second one. Second paragraph, or second entry, September 12. I loved. call me immoral, but I loved that this guy, Hal, just killed a would-be rapist and chucked him in a vault, or in a crypt, rather, to rot, and that the mayor's like, no, it's cool, it's cool. I probably shouldn't, but when someone's trying to commit a heinous crime like that, I'm like, oh well, I don't feel bad for you, you just lost your chance at life. Which, again, I don't know if I would truly feel that way if I was in that situation and looking at the other human being, but it's really hard not to be like, I'm on Hal's side with this. And they, you refer to the punk as a would-be rapist, and my first thought is, if he's going after someone like this, then he's probably done it before. So even though he didn't succeed in this attack, he's probably done it before. So that put me on Hal's side, totally. Oh, and I really loved this, I guess it's 2 sentences at the bottom of the September 12th. I sometimes wonder if that's the reason Hal always smells like a combination of bourbon and weed. Does it haunt him that he killed someone? I love that. So you're giving us good insight into Hal. And at that point, I kind of wondered, maybe Hal's the main character. The story is being written down by someone else, but maybe, maybe the more detail we're getting is about Hal. So that kind of piqued my interest and shifted my focus, and that was just a beautiful, succinct character description that, again, I was impressed with. September 17th. Oh, I also wrote there very nice character descriptions about Gaul. Of course, there's some, you need some commas and to break some of this stuff up, but I really liked the way that you described his physicality, and I feel like I could totally picture him, and in the following action, I could picture him. I couldn't picture Hal's face as much, probably because I hadn't been given enough detail, and of course I can't picture the narrator because I don't know anything about him. But, great job there. September 28th, the very beginning. Now I know why Gaul is scarred up, why we live in the graveyard, why Hal carries a gun with him at all times, why Gaul carries his hatchet, and why the wall surrounding this place has razor wire on it. I thought that was really good building of suspense, because we know there's about to be a big reveal. That said, we don't actually find out the answer to all those questions yet in this chapter, which is fine. Like I said, this left me with a lot of questions and made me want to keep going. But I liked that because now I'm reading. When I was reading, I noticed I started reading faster because I was like, okay, I want to know. I knew it was going to be something spooky. It's a graveyard. Wait, why did I circle that? I would bump? Oh, that's... Okay, another grammatical thing that I just thought I'd remind you of. I decided to go for a walk. Perhaps I would bump into Hal and Gaul, hopefully together, as Gaul still scared me senseless. Oh, in retrospect, maybe that is fine. I was going to say it should be scares, and to just remind you to watch tense. But since he's writing this down after the fact, and he's not scared of Gaul anymore after what happens, I'm assuming? I don't know. I'll leave that one to your discretion. There were 2 suddenlies. Suddenly, I saw Gaul walk out from behind a grave with his hatchet. See, I was cautioned about using the word suddenly. That one of my writing professors was like, just describe what's happening. I had a major tendency to overuse suddenly. And he pointed out that if the action is unexpected, that kind of does the work of the word suddenly. So I would take out one of those. Because it says, suddenly I saw Gaul come out, and then a few lines later, he walked over to him, and suddenly, before I could ask what he wanted, we heard Hal shout in the distance. They reached Hal 5 minutes later. That was a long distance. It's a big graveyard. Okay, I love this sentence. We turned, and I saw something that will haunt me if I live to be 104. I loved that because it's so, that kind of reminds me of Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. And again, it's ratcheting up the suspense even more. I did get a little bit confused at the following sentence. Standing in front of the broken gate to the crypt was a man, about 23 and in a ratty Letterman's jacket. Well, that, of course, immediately made me think of Thriller, because of how he's wearing the Letterman jacket. But the broken gate, I was like, well, wait. Okay, so I paused right there and I pictured what happened, and I knew that the creature had broken out of its crypt, and that's why the gate's broken. But you could alleviate me having to stop and do that mental work by earlier saying, you do say that there was a clang, but maybe when they reach Hal, describe where Hal was, and just, give a brief description of that he was by one of these crypts, one that had a locked gate, or something like that, just so that it's easier to make that leap. So I don't know if this was supposed to be a secret or not, but when he said, I killed you once, I'll kill you again, I immediately knew that it was the rapist that had broken out. In the next paragraph, there was repeated the thing's body, severing its head and limbs from the body. Just repeated words. The smell was horrible. It reeked worse than anything I had ever smelled. I struggle with the word smell because we don't have many in the English language, and so scent is another one you can use in there. Okay, so then this is just a logistics thing. He says, I looked at the now split in half head and remembered how Hal had said he had been thrown into the crypt instead of being given a funeral. I'm not sure if we need reminding. That information was given to us just, 2 pages before. I didn't need reminding. I'd already kind of worked out who it was, and I'm like, oh yeah, because they threw him in there. So, see what your other readers think on that one, because I kind of felt like, well, I don't need to be reminded that, I already know that. And then it ends. So they all go home. This is where I felt like it wasn't a true cliffhanger, because I said the action is over, we feel that all is well. For a true cliffhanger, consider ending after the appearance of the creature. So if you're trying to end on a dun dun dun, what's going to happen next note, that's what I would do. But as it is, the action kind of has calmed down, everyone's safe. I'm left with a ton of questions, like what the heck was that thing? Why did it come out? How did it come out? Does this happen routinely? Why didn't they warn him? Like I said, I have dozens of questions, which is good. But I didn't, if it ended there, where you have it ending, I would want to know more, and I would be compelled to keep reading, but I don't know if I would be so excruciating, like, what? Don't stop there. I don't know, see, cliffhangers are so tough, because at the same time, I'm telling you that after having read all the action and knowing what's about to happen, and if all of a sudden it was just a zombie, I might just be like, oh, well, that was predictable, and then not think of it too much. So, I don't know, I'm sorry, there aren't hard and fast rules when it comes to cliffhangers. It's a tough one. It's kind of by feel. So, for this first chapter, since we're still getting to know everyone, where you have it might be the best spot to end, because now we've seen them all in action. And if you want to end with something burning, you could continue this a little bit longer and introduce another question, have the final sentence be something with a punch, rather than I stood up and walked with Gaul and Hal back to Hal's place. That kind of just ends us with, and we all got tucked into our snuggly beds and the monsters didn't get us. Which you don't want us to end on that note. You want us to end on something that'll make our skin crawl, something that'll make us keep coming back. So rather than my first suggestion, which was end it when the creature comes out, I'd actually now say extend this a teeny bit and end us on something uncomfortable. Because right now we're comfortable as your readers. Okay, I hope that helps. And I'm very impressed that you wrote a lot of this. It sounds like when you were 17. That's awesome. And it's great that you're reworking it now at 22 and it's still alive and growing. It's very cool. So I hope you're excited to be getting this out into the world in some way, shape, or form. And very well done. All right. I'll talk to you soon, I'm sure. Sorry, I'm hunching to be back in the frame. Okay, take care.